High in the shadowed mountains of New Hampshire, where pine forests stretch endlessly and fog crawls between the peaks, there are places where travelers are warned not to stay the night. Wooden lodges stand isolated against the cold wind, their windows glowing faintly long after everyone should be asleep. Floorboards creak when no one is walking. Fireplaces crackle even after the flames have died. And in the silence between gusts of mountain air, something breathes. These lodges were built to shelter explorers, loggers, hikers, and families seeking escape. But the mountains have memories. Accidents buried under snow. Guests who vanished without a trace. Voices lost to avalanches and storms. Some lodges were abandoned. Some still welcome visitors. Yet many who stay the night report the same feeling. They are not alone. Tonight, we journey deep into the haunted mountain lodges of New Hampshire, where isolation becomes terror, and the wilderness watches every move. If you were snowed in at a remote lodge, with no signal, no roads, and footsteps echoing outside your door, would you wait until morninga or would you run into the dark woods? Hello, my dear friend. I hope you are warm and safe wherever you are, because the places we are about to visit are cold in more ways than one. New Hampshire's mountains are known for their beauty, but also for their danger. Sudden storms. Unforgiving terrain. Endless forests that swallow sound and direction. For centuries, travelers built lodges high in these mountains to survive the nights. Some became refuges. Others became traps. Workers died during construction. Guests never returned from hikes. Entire lodges burned, collapsed, or were abandoned after unexplained events. Visitors today speak of doors opening on their own, whispers carried through heating vents, and figures standing at the edges of tree lines, watching silently. Some report waking up to find footprints in the snow leading straight to their windows. Others claim the mountains themselves seem to shift, trapping them inside. Before we step inside these lodges, let me ask you something. If you woke in the middle of the night at a mountain lodge, and saw someone standing outside your window in a snowstorm, motionless and silent, would you look closer? Or pull the curtains and pretend you never saw them? Take a deep breath. And let us climb into the top haunted mountain lodges of New Hampshire. Whisper Peak Lodge stands just below a narrow ridge where the land rises sharply and the sky feels close enough to touch. Built of timber and stone, it was designed to endure harsh weather and long winters. Storms arrive here without warning, rolling over the ridge with sudden force, bringing wind that rattles shutters and rain that strikes the roof like falling gravel. From its earliest days, the lodge was known for its isolation and its silence. Yet those who stay there quickly learn that it is never truly quiet. The lodge was constructed as a refuge for travelers crossing the high pass, a place to rest before descending into the valleys beyond. Builders chose the site for its view and its access to fresh water, but some questioned the decision. The ridge had long been avoided by locals, who said sound behaved strangely there, carried and twisted by wind and stone. These concerns were noted and then ignored in favor of practicality. During daylight hours, Whisper Peak Lodge feels welcoming. Staff members move quietly through the halls, accustomed to the rhythms of the building and the moods of the mountain. The interior smells of wood and old stone warmed by fire. Guests arrive tired and grateful, relieved to find solid walls and shelter from unpredictable weather. Night changes everything. As darkness settles and the winds begin to rise, the lodge reveals its other character. Guests lying awake in their rooms hear faint sounds traveling through the walls. Then the sounds become clearer, forming patterns that feel intentional. Whispers begin softly, just at the edge of hearing. They slip through cracks and vents, along hallways and behind headboards. The voices are never loud. They do not shout or cry out. They speak gently, as if afraid to disturb something sleeping nearby. Some guests report that the whispers sound like warnings. Words form slowly, urging caution, telling listeners to stay inside or remain still. These voices carry a sense of urgency without panic, repeating phrases until the meaning becomes unsettlingly clear. Those who hear them often find themselves checking doors and windows without knowing why. Other voices behave differently. They call names, softly and persistently. The names are familiar to the listener, sometimes belonging to loved ones, sometimes to people long absent from their lives. Turning on lights offers no relief. The whispers do not stop. They only fade when dawn begins to lighten the sky. Staff members are careful in how they speak about these experiences. Many have heard the whispers themselves, though they rarely discuss details. They acknowledge that sound carries easily through the building, amplified by wind and weather. Yet even they admit that some nights feel different, heavier, as though the lodge itself is listening. Records from the early years mention strange complaints from visitors. Journals kept by caretakers note restless guests and unexplained departures in the middle of the night. One entry describes a stormless evening filled with constant murmuring, though no wind was recorded on the ridge. Over time, theories emerged. Some believed the whispers were caused by wind channels within the walls, shaped by the loggia's unusual construction. Others suggested that changes in air pressure during storms created acoustic illusions, tricking tired minds into hearing voices where none existed. Still, these explanations failed to account for certain details. The whispers often spoke with recognizable cadence. They paused, repeated, and responded to movement. Guests reported that the voices grew quieter when they covered their ears, only to return when they relaxed again. No mechanical explanation fully addressed these patterns. Local stories offer another perspective. Long before the lodge was built, the ridge was considered a place of messages. Hunters claimed that voices carried warnings across the peaks, guiding them away from sudden storms or unstable ground. Elders spoke of the mountain remembering those who passed through, holding fragments of their voices in stone and snow. Whether these stories are metaphor or memory remains unclear. What is certain is that Whisper Peak Lodge exists in a place where sound behaves differently, where the boundary between noise and meaning grows thin. On the quietest nights, when storms hold back and the air feels unnaturally still, the whispers are said to be the clearest. Guests describe the sensation of being addressed directly, not threatened, not comforted, but acknowledged. The voices do not seek harm. They seek attention. By morning, the lodge returns to normal. Guests gather for breakfast, tired but reluctant to speak about the night. Some laugh off their experiences. Others leave early, cutting their stay short without explanation. A few choose to return, drawn by curiosity or a desire to understand what they heard. Whisper Peak Lodge remains open, standing firm against wind and weather. Its walls continue to shelter travelers, its fires continue to burn. Yet when night falls and the ridge disappears into cloud, the lodge remembers its other purpose. It listens. And in the darkness, it whispers back, carrying warnings, names, and fragments of voices that refuse to be silenced, ensuring that no one who stays there ever truly sleeps alone. Black Pine Summit Lodge sits high above the valleys, where the road narrows and the forest thickens until the outside world feels very far away. Tall pines crowd the slope on all sides, their trunks rising straight and close together, blocking sightlines and swallowing sound. Snow lingers here longer than in the lowlands. Even in early winter, the ground stays white and firm, reflecting the loggia's dark silhouette against the trees. The building was constructed as a seasonal retreat, a place for travelers to rest after long journeys through the mountains. Its design was practical rather than welcoming. A wide porch facing the forest, not the view. From the beginning, visitors remarked on how quiet the area felt. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind that presses inward. Wind moves through the trees without rustling branches. Snow falls without sound. Even voices seem to dull quickly, as if the forest absorbs them before they can travel far. At night, that silence deepens. Guests staying at the lodge often notice shapes between the trees after dark. Figures standing just beyond the reach of porch lights. Too tall to be shrubs. Too still to be animals. They appear briefly, then vanish when the light shifts or a curtain is drawn back. At first, people assume exhaustion or imagination. The lodge is isolated. Weather can delay arrivals and departures by days. With limited communication and long nights, the mind fills gaps. That explanation satisfies some, but not all. They stand at varying distances, always facing the building. Never approaching. Never retreating until noticed directly. Guests describe the unsettling feeling of being observed without intent, as if the forest itself is aware of the lodge and quietly attentive. Inside, the building remains solid and warm. Fires burn steadily. Floorboards creak with familiar age. Nothing appears out of place. And yet, after midnight, a new sound begins. Footsteps. They circle the lodge slowly, crunching through snow with deliberate weight. Not hurried. Not random. A steady pacing that moves along the perimeter of the building, passing beneath windows and along the porch steps. Those inside freeze, listening. Some peer outside, expecting to see tracks forming clearly in the fresh snow. Others remain still, afraid to draw attention. The footsteps continue for several minutes, sometimes longer, then fade back into the forest. By morning, the snow is untouched. No tracks. No disturbances. The ground appears smooth and unbroken, as if no one walked there at all. This pattern has repeated across decades. Caretakers assigned to the lodge report similar experiences, even when staying alone. They hear movement outside during storms that should mask sound entirely. They sense presence near windows, close enough to feel, yet never visible when lights are turned on. Records from early years mention travelers who left abruptly, cutting stays short without clear explanation. Some complained of sleepless nights. Others described unease they could not name. A few refused to return, citing the forest rather than the building itself. The forest around Black Pine Summit Lodge has its own history. Before the lodge was built, the area served as a seasonal passage for hunters and traders. Routes shifted with weather, and not all who entered the forest emerged on schedule. Snowstorms arrived quickly at this elevation. Paths vanished overnight. Stories circulated of people losing direction within sight of shelter, unable to reach it before cold and fatigue overcame them. No mass tragedy is recorded. No single event explains the persistent presence. Instead, the mountain collected moments. Delays. Missed turns. Long waits in the cold. The quiet accumulation of those who lingered too long between places. Visitors who see the figures often describe them as incomplete. No faces. No clear features. Just upright shapes framed by darkness and snow. They do not move unless observed directly. And even then, their disappearance feels less like motion and more like absence. The footsteps suggest something different. They imply weight. Intention. Awareness of the building's shape. The pacing follows the lodge's outline with accuracy, as if memorized. Guests sometimes count the seconds between steps and find the rhythm unnervingly consistent. Attempts to record the sounds yield little. Audio captures faint crunching that fades into static. Video shows empty snow. Motion sensors trigger briefly, then reset without explanation. Daylight brings relief. Sunlight filters through the pines, softening their shadows. The lodge feels ordinary again. Guests laugh at their own nerves, attributing fear to darkness and isolation. Many convince themselves it will not happen again. But the forest does not change its behavior. On subsequent nights, figures reappear. Footsteps return. Always after midnight. Always gone by dawn. Some believe the lodge is not the focus, but the boundary. A solid structure standing amid a place where direction and certainty dissolve. The figures remain between the trees, unwilling or unable to cross into light and warmth. The footsteps circle but never enter, as if bound to the outside. Those who stay long enough develop habits. Curtains remain closed after dark. Porch lights stay on through the night. Doors are checked repeatedly, not out of fear of entry, but of acknowledgement. It feels safer not to look. Black Pine Summit Lodge continues to operate, though bookings are limited and weather dependent. The forest remains dense and unchanged. Snow falls and resets the ground each morning, erasing any trace of movement. The pines stand close together, watching the lodge as they always have. And when night returns, the figures resume their places between the trees. Footsteps circle the building, measured and patient, until darkness settles fully and the lodge waits, isolated once more, surrounded by the stillness of Black Pine Summit. Frost Hollow Lodge sits where the forest dips into a shallow basin, a place locals describe as a pocket where weather lingers. Tall trees ring the property like a wall, their branches knitting overhead and dimming the light even at midday. The building itself looks welcoming from a distance, timber beams, a stone chimney, wide windows meant to frame the woods. But the closer you get, the more the air changes. Even in summer, the lodge feels cold. Guests often notice it before they reach the front steps. The warmth of the day fades as if a shadow has passed over the sun. The breeze turns thin and dry. Skin tightens, and breath becomes faintly visible in the morning hours, though the surrounding forest remains warm and green. Inside, the cold settles with unnatural certainty. It is not the refreshing cool of shade or the gentle chill of air conditioning. The fireplace can burn for hours, but the air refuses to soften fully. Heat rises and disappears, as though the lodge is built to hold cold the way stone holds water. The owners have tried everything. Sealing windows, reinforcing insulation, replacing the heating system more than once. Contractors find nothing broken. Thermometers disagree depending on where they are placed. Near the center of a room, the temperature seems normal. Near the walls, it drops suddenly, a steep invisible slope into cold. Some guests leave after a single night. Others stay, drawn by curiosity, by the quiet beauty of the forest, by the challenge of explaining what does not make sense. The first loud sign usually comes from the doors. A heavy slam echoes through hallways when no one is moving. A bathroom door snaps shut with force. A closet door closes as if pushed. The sound is sharp and immediate, the kind that makes conversation stop mid-sentence. People rush to check for drafts, for loose hinges, for someone playing a prank. They find doors latched properly. Windows closed. Air still. What makes the slams more unsettling is their timing. They often happen just after the lodge grows quiet, when guests settle into their rooms and the building should be resting. It is as if the lodge listens for silence and answers it with impact. Those who work there have learned not to react too strongly. Old buildings shift, they say. Wood expands and contracts. Wind finds its way through gaps. Reasonable explanations, spoken with practiced calm. Yet even the staff admits that this lodge behaves differently than any other. On certain nights, the cold deepens without warning. It moves room to room like an unseen tide. A corridor that was tolerable becomes breathlessly chill. Metal handles sting the palm. Floors feel like ice through socks. Guests wrap themselves in blankets, expecting the chill to fade, but it lingers, steady and patient. Then morning comes, and with it the frost. Not outside on windows, where frost might form. On interior walls. Guests wake and find delicate white patterns spreading across painted wood and plaster, as if the lodge exhaled winter during the night. At first glance the shapes seem random, branching lines and feathery edges. But then the mind catches on something familiar. A curve that resembles a cheek. A hollow that could be an eye socket. A line that reads as a mouth, slightly open. Faces. Not one or two, but many, forming in different rooms, on different walls, at different heights, all oriented outward as though looking directly into the space. Some appear near beds. Others near doors. A few form in corners where no one would expect frost to gather. The patterns fade as the day warms, but they do not melt like ordinary frost. They retreat slowly, thinning from the edges inward, leaving behind a damp chill that lingers in the paint. Photographs rarely capture the effect properly. In images, the frost looks like ordinary condensation. But in person, the faces are unmistakable, their expressions subtle and varied. Some seem blank. Others seem strained, as if caught between emergence and disappearance. Guests have described the sensation of being watched long before they see the frost. A presence in the room that feels close but silent. The urge to turn toward a wall. The uncomfortable feeling that a thought has been overheard. One visitor wrote in the lodge journal that the faces seemed to shift when not looked at directly. Another said the patterns were most defined at the moment of waking, as if the lodge waited for consciousness to return before revealing itself. The lodge has a history, though it is not the kind written on plaques or advertised in brochures. It was built long ago as a private retreat, a place meant for isolation. Records indicate it changed hands several times. There are gaps where names vanish and renovations occur with no explanation. Locals mention a winter long ago when the forest around the lodge was unusually quiet, when animals avoided the basin and travelers took longer routes to stay away. Some believe the hollow itself holds cold, a natural basin where air sinks and stays. Others suggest underground water channels run beneath the building, cooling the foundation. These theories explain pieces but not the whole. They cannot account for doors slamming in still air. They cannot account for frost-forming faces that appear to look back. On the quietest nights, when the lodge is nearly full and yet sound feels swallowed. Guests sometimes report a faint crackling along the walls. Not the snap of wood, but a soft shifting, like ice forming. It is a sound that suggests the frost is not an accident but a process, deliberate and slow. Those who leave often describe the same final impression. The lodge is beautiful, the forest serene, and yet something inside the building feels unfinished. Like a conversation paused mid-breath. Frost Hollow Lodge remains open, its rooms booked by travelers who want solitude, by hikers seeking rest, by the curious who arrive with cameras and skepticism. But some wake to the unmistakable shapes on the walls, the faces formed in pale frost, staring outward as if the lodge is not empty at all. And when a door slams in the darkness, sharp enough to jolt the heart awake, it feels less like a draft and more like a warning. A reminder that in this hollow, winter does not simply return with the seasons. It waits inside, gathering quietly, learning the shape of human presence. And leaving its silent witnesses behind before dawn. Ravenstone Mountain Lodge stands alone on a narrow ridge where the trees thin and the wind never fully rests. The stone walls rise dark against the slope, heavy and deliberate. As if the mountain itself pressed upward to form them. From a distance, the lodge appears sturdy and welcoming, a refuge against cold weather and long climbs. Up close, something about it feels watchful. The lodge earned its name long before travelers began recording their impressions. Ravens gather on its roof in unusual numbers, their black forms lining the peaks and chimneys like carved figures. Visitors notice immediately. Their presence is constant, so expected that staff rarely comment on it. Arrive at dawn and linger through the day, shifting only when the wind becomes too strong. Their arrival is a sight to behold. During daylight hours, the birds are mostly silent. They watch. Heads tilt in unison. Wings adjust to balance. When someone steps outside, the ravens follow the movement with focused attention, as though measuring distance and intent. Guides explain that the roof provides warmth and elevation. A perfect resting place. Night brings a different behavior. After sunset, the ravens begin to scream. Their calls cut through wind and rain with startling clarity. Storms that drown out every other sound fail to quiet them. Thunder rolls across the mountainside, yet the cries continue, sharp and urgent, echoing off stone and timber. Those who step onto the balconies at night see the birds silhouetted against the sky, wings spread wide to keep balance as gusts pass through. Lightning flashes reveal dozens of shapes clinging to the roofline, unmoved by rain. Their calls rise and fall together, creating the impression of coordination rather than chaos. Inside the lodge, the atmosphere shifts after dark. The halls feel narrower. The air grows heavier, carrying the scent of old wood and damp stone. Guests settling into their rooms report hearing movement above the ceiling. A soft rustle at first, like branches brushing the roof. Then the sound becomes clearer. Wings flapping within the attic space. Feathers striking beams. The unmistakable noise of birds in motion. Staff members respond calmly to these reports. The attic is sealed, they explain. Insulated and reinforced. There is no access point for wildlife. Inspections are conducted regularly. Nothing has ever been found. Still, the sounds return. Late at night, when the lodge grows quiet, the flapping intensifies. The flapping moves from one end of the building to the other, as if something is circling overhead. The sound stops abruptly, leaving a silence that feels incomplete, like a held breath. Some describe the sensation of being watched from above even while inside their rooms. The feeling does not fade when lights are turned on. It lingers, pressing gently at the back of the mind. Curtains feel thinner. Walls feel less solid. Historians note that Ravenstone Mountain Lodge was built using local materials, including stone quarried from nearby cliffs. Those cliffs have long served as nesting grounds for ravens. The birds were present before the lodge existed, before the trail was cut, before the first travelers arrived. The structure did not attract them. It simply rose within their domain. Old journals kept by early caretakers mention restless nights and constant noise. They write of birds striking the roof repeatedly, as if testing it. They write of storms where the ravens refused to leave, clinging tighter as the wind increased. One entry notes that the attic felt crowded even when empty. Modern maintenance teams have searched the attic thoroughly. They report dust undisturbed for years. No feathers. No nests. No sign of intrusion. And yet, the sound of wings continues to be heard by those staying beneath it. During severe weather, the phenomenon intensifies. Rain lashes the roof. Wind howls through the trees. Ravens scream louder than ever, their voices cutting through the storm with unnatural precision. Inside, the flapping grows heavier, slower, as if larger wings are moving through the confined space. Guests sometimes leave early, unable to rest. Others stay longer than planned, drawn by a strange attachment to the place. They speak of vivid dreams filled with dark skies and circling shapes. Of standing on the roof themselves, balanced against the wind, watching the world below. At dawn, the lodge appears unchanged. The ravens remain perched above, quiet once more. The attic is still. Daylight softens the edges of the building, making it seem ordinary again. Conversations over breakfast skirt around the night without addressing it directly. Those who ask about the ravens are told they are intelligent birds, known for remembering places and faces, known for gathering where history lingers. The explanation feels incomplete, but few push further. As the sun climbs higher, guests depart down the mountain path. From below, the lodge looks peaceful, framed by trees and sky. The ravens remain on the roof, watching until the last figure disappears. When night returns, the mountain darkens. Storms roll in. And Ravenstone Mountain Lodge resumes its vigil, stone walls holding steady while wings beat in the attic above. Nothing is ever found. Yet no one who has heard the sound doubts that something is there, waiting, watching, and never quite leaving. Lost Trail Lodge stands at the edge of a dense forest where the hiking path narrows and disappears into uneven ground. The building appears welcoming at first, a wide porch facing the trees, warm wood tones softened by years of weather. During the day, it feels like a natural resting place, a shelter offered to travelers before they continue deeper into the wilderness. The trail nearby has a troubled history. Several hikers set out along this route and never returned. Searches covered miles of forest, following footprints that faded into rock and moss. No clear explanations emerged, only unanswered questions and a growing sense that the landscape did not always behave as expected. The lodge was built to serve these travelers. Its design is simple and practical, intended to provide rest, warmth, and guidance. Maps hang on the walls. Lanterns line the hallways. Everything suggests safety and order. Yet something about the interior resists familiarity, especially after sunset. As daylight fades, the lodge begins to feel larger. Corridors stretch farther than memory allows. Doors appear slightly farther apart than before. Walking from one end of the building to the other takes longer than expected, even at a steady pace. The change is subtle, difficult to measure, but consistently reported. Guests often notice it first in the hallways. A short walk to the dining room feels extended, as though distance itself has shifted. Lamps cast steady light, yet shadows linger at the edges, refusing to settle. Rooms are comfortable and quiet. Windows look out onto the forest, reflecting dark shapes of trees and sky. At night, the view becomes a wall of black broken only by moonlight. Inside, the air feels still, holding warmth longer than expected. The disorientation rarely begins in the rooms. It starts when guests step back into the hall. A door closes, and the corridor beyond seems unfamiliar. Turning left or right feels equally uncertain. Some describe a moment of hesitation, as if direction must be chosen carefully. Those who walk the halls late at night report a strange looping effect. They leave their room intending to reach the stairs or exit, only to arrive again at the same door they just closed. The realization comes slowly. The carpet pattern matches. The wall decor aligns too perfectly to be coincidence. At first, most assume a simple mistake. Fatigue, low light, or distraction provide reasonable explanations. Guests try again, choosing a different turn, counting doors, watching landmarks. The result remains unchanged. The hallway leads them back, quietly and without resistance. There is no sense of panic in these moments, only confusion. The lodge does not trap with force. It redirects gently, almost politely. Guiding movement in a way that feels deliberate but calm. Doors open easily. Floors remain solid. Nothing appears hostile. Staff members acknowledge these reports with measured responses. They suggest waiting until morning or asking for assistance. During the day, hallways behave normally. Distances shorten. Directions make sense again. Whatever occurs at night leaves no visible trace. The forest outside adds to the effect. From the lodge, the trees appear closer after dark, pressing in around the structure. Sounds from the woods travel unpredictably, sometimes distant, sometimes close. Wind shifts direction without warning. The trailhead sign is harder to spot, even with lights. Some believe the lodge mirrors the forest itself. Trails in the woods are known to curve unexpectedly, leading hikers back to familiar clearings without obvious reason. Orientation becomes unreliable beneath dense canopy and uneven terrain. The lodge seems to carry this quality indoors, reshaping space in subtle ways. Those who stayed during long winter nights describe the strongest effects. Snow muffles sound outside, and darkness arrives early. Hallways feel especially elongated, stretching beyond normal perception. Walking them becomes a slow exercise in patience rather than distance. Despite the confusion, guests are not harmed. Morning always restores clarity. Rooms remain where they should be. Exits lead outside without trouble. The lodge functions as intended once the sun rises. The disappearances along the trail remain unresolved. Some speculate that the same disorienting influence exists beyond the lodge walls, amplified by distance and isolation. Others believe the lodge offers a contained version of something much larger, a boundary where confusion is limited and survivable. What is clear is that Lost Trail Lodge affects perception. It bends familiarity without breaking it. It challenges certainty without introducing danger. For some, this creates unease. For others, it inspires quiet fascination. Visitors who leave often carry a lingering doubt about their sense of direction, not just within the lodge, but elsewhere as well. Straight paths feel less absolute. Short distances feel flexible. The experience encourages awareness, caution, and patience. Lost Trail Lodge does not announce its strangeness. It offers shelter, warmth, and rest, just as it always has. Only those who walk its halls at night notice the difference. Moving through space that seems to fold gently back on itself. Near the forgotten trail where travelers once vanished. The lodge stands as a quiet counterpoint. It does not take those who enter. Instead, it reminds them how easily direction can be lost. And how valuable it is to pause, wait for daylight, and find the path again. Timberline Echo Lodge sits at the edge of a high forest where the trees thin and the wind moves more freely. The building is long and low, constructed from thick logs darkened by age and weather. It was never meant to be elegant. It was built to endure, to shelter working men who spent their days cutting timber and their nights too tired to notice much beyond food and sleep. In its early years, the lodge was full of life and labor. Loggers returned each evening with aching arms and mud on their boots. Tools were leaned against walls. Chains were coiled on the floor. The air carried the smell of sap, sweat, and wood smoke. Even after lights were out, the building creaked and settled, holding the residue of long days of work. When logging operations moved deeper into the forest and then faded entirely, the lodge was left behind. Seasons passed. Snow piled against the walls. Wind worked its way into every seam. Eventually the lodge was reopened as a remote retreat, marketed for its history and isolation. Visitors arrived seeking quiet and distance from the modern world. They found silence during the day. At night, something else. The first sounds were easy to dismiss. A sharp crack echoed through the hallway, like an axe striking wood. Then came another, rhythmic and deliberate. The sound repeated, spaced evenly, as though someone were working just out of sight. Chains followed. A low metallic scrape dragged slowly across wooden floors. The noise moved from room to room, never hurried, never stopping completely. Guests stepped into hallways expecting to find equipment left behind or staff at work. The lodge stood empty, floors clear, doors closed. As reports accumulated, a pattern emerged. The sounds did not overlap randomly. Axes struck in measured rhythm. Chains dragged with weight and resistance. Footsteps followed, heavy and slow, as if carrying a burden. These sounds followed the old layout of the lodge, tracing paths once taken by working crews. Those who stayed alone experienced something more personal. In empty rooms, heavy breathing filled the space behind them. It was close, uneven, and tired, like the breath of someone who had worked too long without rest. When guests turned around, the sound shifted, remaining just out of view. Some felt the breath at their backs while walking down corridors. Others heard it beside their beds, steady and patient, continuing long after sleep should have come. No voice accompanied it. No words formed. Only breath, persistent and present. Staff members grew accustomed to complaints. They checked heating systems and inspected old pipes. They walked the lodge at night with flashlights, finding nothing disturbed. Yet even they admitted that certain rooms felt occupied even when they were clearly empty. Historical records revealed that Timberline Echo Lodge had been used during a particularly intense logging period. Crews worked long hours under harsh conditions. Accidents were common, though rarely recorded in detail. The focus was production, not reflection. Men who could not keep pace left quietly. Others stayed, driven by necessity and routine. The lodge absorbed these routines. Work sounds repeated day after day, year after year. Axes struck. Chains dragged. Breathing filled the air as men pushed themselves beyond exhaustion. When the work ended, the structure remained, holding the rhythm without the bodies that created it. Guests began to notice that the sounds responded to their presence. Axes struck more clearly when someone stood still. Chains grew louder in hallways that were actively used. The breathing followed movement, slowing when guests slowed, quickening when they hurried away. No sound ever crossed the threshold of the building. Outside, the forest remained quiet. Inside, the lodge carried its past forward, room by room. Those who stayed multiple nights reported a growing sense of being observed, not watched with intent, but acknowledged as part of the space. The sounds never threatened. They never rushed. They continued their work, indifferent to the living. One visitor attempted to record the noises. Playback revealed only faint echoes and static, nothing matching what had been heard clearly in the moment. Another tried earplugs, only to feel the vibrations of sound through the floor and walls. Local residents were unsurprised. They said the lodge had always been loud at night, even after it was abandoned. Some claimed that the forest itself remembered the labor, that the clearing had been carved with effort so intense it left an imprint. On the coldest nights, when wind pressed hard against the walls, the sounds became most distinct. Axes struck with purpose. Chains dragged with effort. Breathing filled rooms like a steady engine. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by the sense of being followed through spaces that should have been empty. By morning, everything stopped. Sunlight revealed stillness. Tools were nowhere to be found. Floors lay undisturbed. Guests gathered quietly, often avoiding eye contact, unsure how to speak about what they had heard. Some left early, unsettled and exhausted. Others stayed longer, drawn by curiosity or a strange respect for the persistence of the place. They spoke softly, moved carefully, and listened more than they talked. Axes strike wood that is no longer there. Chains drag across floors worn smooth by time. Heavy breathing follows the living through empty rooms, not to frighten them, but to remind them that effort leaves traces, and that some places never truly rest. Snowvale Lodge rests on a high mountain shelf where the forest thins and the wind loses its direction. The road leading to it is narrow and pale, often dusted white even when the valleys below remain clear. Travelers notice it immediately. Weather reports predict open skies, yet flakes drift steadily around the lodge, soft and persistent, as if the building exists beneath its own private sky. From a distance, the lodge appears wrapped in a curtain of white. The snowfall is gentle, never violent. No blizzards. No roaring wind. Just a constant descent of fine snow that settles on railings, rooflines, and the ground, then melts slowly, only to be replaced again. The building was constructed decades ago as a winter retreat for travelers crossing the mountain pass. Thick stone at the base. Heavy timber above. Windows designed to hold warmth rather than views. Over time, visitors began to notice something unusual. They would arrive during clear weather, expecting crisp air and open ground. Instead, they stepped into falling snow that seemed confined to the lodge itself. Just beyond the property line, the flakes thinned or vanished entirely. The effect was subtle but unmistakable, as though an invisible boundary surrounded the building. Lights from inside the lodge reflected off the white veil, turning the windows into glowing rectangles suspended in darkness. Beyond that glow, shapes appeared within the falling snow. Figures standing just out of reach, partially obscured by drifting flakes, motionless and silent. Guests often noticed them by accident. A glance through a window. A pause on the stairs. A moment when the snowfall seemed to move differently in one place, revealing the outline of shoulders, a head, the suggestion of a stance too upright to belong to nature. When stared at directly, the figures did not move. They did not approach or retreat. They remained where they were, watching, until snowfall thickened or light shifted, and their shapes dissolved back into white motion. Fatigue plays a role at high altitude. Long nights invite imagination. Figures behind the snow. Always outside. Always silent. They did not approach or retreat. They remained where they were, watching, until snowfall thickened or light shifted, and their shapes dissolved back into white motion. Some guests woke to find handprints pressed against the frosted glass of their windows. Clear impressions of palms and fingers, flattened against the cold surface from the outside. The frost around them remained intact, untouched by melting or disturbance. The prints were always at standing height. No tracks appeared beneath the windows. Snow on the ground below remained smooth and undisturbed, as if nothing had approached the building during the night. By the time staff arrived to inspect the marks, the rising warmth inside caused them to fade, leaving only memory and unease behind. Not every guest experienced this. Some slept through the night without incident. Others felt watched but saw nothing. A few reported hearing faint sounds beneath the steady hush of falling snow, like fabric brushing against wood or slow breathing carried on cold air. The loggia's logs record an odd pattern. Weather instruments placed nearby show normal conditions. Nearby stations report clear skies or light precipitation when Snowvale Lodge remains surrounded by snowfall. Wind direction does not explain the phenomenon. Temperature readings align with the region, yet snow continues to fall regardless. Engineers examined the structure for thermal effects. They suggested rising heat might draw moisture downward, creating localized snowfall. The explanation satisfied some questions but failed to explain why the effect persisted at night, or why figures appeared consistently within it. Before the lodge was built, the mountain shelf served as a resting point for travelers crossing the pass on foot and horseback. Snowstorms were common, and visibility could vanish without warning. People waited here for weather to break, sometimes longer than planned. Some never completed the crossing, choosing to turn back or remain through the season. The mountain kept its stories quietly. No records of disaster mark the location. No single event anchors the unease. Instead, the atmosphere feels accumulated, layered like snow itself. Moments stacked upon moments, waiting behind a curtain of white. Guests who encounter the figures describe a shared feeling. Not fear in the sharp sense, but awareness. A certainty that they are being observed patiently. The figures do not signal danger or welcome. They simply remain, separated by snowfall and glass, as if acknowledging the warmth inside without seeking it. The handprints intensify that feeling. They are never smeared or frantic. No signs of force. Just steady contact, as though someone stood quietly in the falling snow and rested their hands against the window, feeling the difference in temperature, the presence of life beyond the glass. After sunrise, the snowfall eases. The veil thins. The forest reappears clearly. Guests step outside to find ordinary ground, damp but empty. The lodge looks like any other mountain building again, solid and unremarkable. Many convince themselves the experience was exaggerated. Until the next night arrives. Snow begins to fall again, softly and without explanation. Light catches it, turning the air into a slow-moving screen. Shapes gather behind it, faint but unmistakable. Snowvale Lodge continues to welcome visitors, though few stay more than a night or two. Those who do learn to keep curtains drawn and lights low. They stop checking the windows after dark. The snow falls whether it should or not. Figures watch from behind it. And sometimes, when frost thickens on the glass, hands appear where no one stands, pressed gently against the barrier between warmth and cold, waiting until morning erases the trace. Coldwatch Ridge Lodge stands along a narrow spine of rock where the land drops sharply on both sides. The ridge cuts through the mountain like a blade, exposed to sky and wind from every direction. Only when you arrive do you feel how little separates solid ground from open air. Strong winds are common here. They rise suddenly, rushing along the ridge with focused force, pressing against the lodge from one side, then the other. The structure responds in subtle ways. Floorboards flex. Windows hum softly. Chandeliers sway by fractions of an inch. It is not enough to cause alarm, but enough to be noticed. Guests often pause, holding their breath, unsure if the movement came from the building or from themselves. The sensation is not constant. It arrives in waves, tied to the wind, then fades. Over time, people learn the rhythm, the gentle lean and return. Staff insist the lodge is safe. Engineers have confirmed the design allows for controlled movement, a necessary adaptation for a structure built on such a narrow ridge. Yet knowing this does little to calm the feeling that the ground beneath you is not entirely fixed. During daylight, the surrounding cliffs dominate the view. Sheer stone faces rise and fall around the lodge, their surfaces fractured and dark, marked by long shadows. Trails once connected the lodge to nearby outposts, but erosion and time have erased most of them. What remains are faint scars in the rock, lines that hint at paths rather than confirm them. It is along these cliffs that guests begin to feel watched. The sensation does not come with sound. No footsteps. No voices. It is a quiet pressure, a tightening at the back of the neck, the instinctive urge to glance sideways. People find themselves scanning the cliff faces, expecting movement, expecting eyes. Even when alone on the ridge, even when the wind drowns out all other noise, there is a sense of attention directed inward, toward the lodge itself. As if the surrounding stone is not empty, but aware. Staff members grow accustomed to it. They work with their backs to the cliffs, rarely lingering outdoors after sunset. New arrivals notice how quickly conversations move inside, how doors close firmly, how curtains are drawn before night fully settles. Darkness comes early on the ridge. The sun slips behind distant peaks, leaving the lodge in deep shadow while the sky above remains faintly lit. The building responds with quiet creaks and sighs, sounds that feel too deliberate to be purely mechanical. Then the lights appear. At first, guests assume they are reflections, lanterns from inside mirrored in glass. But the lights move independently. Small points of warm glow drift along the cliffs, tracing lines that no longer exist. They follow curves and switchbacks where trails once ran, pausing at turns. Rising and falling with the imagined terrain. The lanterns do not flicker wildly. They move with purpose, steady and controlled. As though carried by unseen hands. Sometimes there is one. Sometimes several, spaced evenly apart. They never approach the lodge directly, but circle it, outlining the ridge in slow procession. Those who watch from windows feel an unexpected mix of calm and unease. The lights are not threatening. They do not rush or surge. Yet their presence suggests activity where none should be possible. Guests have stepped outside to see them more clearly. The cold is sharper at night, the wind louder. From the open air, the lanterns appear farther away, their glow softened by distance. No sound accompanies them. No footsteps. No voices calling across the ridge. Attempts to follow the lights always fail. Paths end abruptly. Rocks give way to steep drops. The lanterns continue along routes that the living can no longer walk. Some believe the lights mark old patrol routes, carried by keepers who once guarded the ridge. Others think they are echoes of travelers lost to time, repeating familiar journeys without destination. Practical explanations fall short. There are no access roads. No equipment capable of producing such consistent movement. The lights fade before dawn, one by one, retreating into darkness. Until only the cliffs remain. Morning reveals nothing out of place. No footprints. No residue. The ridge looks as it always has. Sleep comes unevenly at Coldwatch Ridge Lodge. Guests report waking suddenly, heart racing, with the certainty of being observed. Others dream of walking narrow paths with lanterns in hand, the drop at their side endless, the wind urging them forward. By day, the lodge feels lighter. Sun warms the timber. Wind softens. The sense of movement becomes reassuring rather than unsettling. Conversations resume on the deck. Laughter carries across the ridge. Yet even in daylight, some guests glance toward the cliffs, half expecting to see a lingering glow. Coldwatch Ridge Lodge continues to welcome visitors drawn by isolation and views that stretch for miles. Most leave with stories of wind and beauty, of nights restless but memorable. A few leave changed, quieter, more attentive to the spaces between solid ground and open air. They speak of a lodge that moves just enough to remind you where you are. Of cliffs that seem to watch without eyes. Of lanterns that trace forgotten paths through darkness, not to frighten, but to mark presence. And when the wind rises and the building sways almost imperceptibly, it feels as though the ridge itself is breathing, holding the lodge gently in place, waiting for night to fall and the lights to return. Ashfall Mountain Lodge sits high above the tree line, where the air thins and the wind carries long memories. Its timber frame and stone foundation appear solid and reassuring, rebuilt with care and intention. From the outside, there is little to suggest that the lodge once stood at the center of a devastating fire that nearly erased it from the mountainside. Decades ago, flames swept through this ridge with relentless speed. Dry winds pushed the fire uphill, feeding it with pine and brush. The lodge was occupied at the time, filled with travelers seeking shelter from an approaching storm. When smoke first appeared, it was mistaken for fog rolling in from the valley below. By the time the danger was understood, escape routes were already narrowing. Fire crews later described the blaze as unusually focused, circling the structure before striking it fully. Portions of the lodge were consumed, while others remained standing against all expectation. Stone walls cracked but did not collapse. Stairways blackened yet held. When the fire finally passed, the building stood wounded but upright, surrounded by ash and silence. Restoration took years. Charred beams were replaced. Smoke-stained stone was cleaned. New life returned slowly to the ridge. Ashfall Mountain Lodge reopened with careful optimism, its survival framed as a testament to resilience. Visitors arrived eager to experience a place that had endured what should have destroyed it. From the beginning, something felt unresolved. Even on calm days, guests noticed the smell of smoke drifting through the halls. Staff search for sources each time it is reported. Fireplaces are cold, and kitchens quiet. No trace of active smoke is ever found. The scent appears without pattern. It may fill a hallway briefly, then vanish. It may linger in a room for hours before fading. Some guests wake to it in the middle of the night, their senses alert before their minds understand why. Opening windows does nothing. Closing doors does nothing. The smell moves freely, as if unbound by walls. As daylight fades, the lodge grows quieter. Shadows stretch across the interior walls, cast by lamps and passing clouds. Most behave as expected, shifting gently with the light. Others do not. Visitors report seeing flickers along the walls that do not match any movement in the room. Shapes form briefly, elongated and uneven. The suggestion of arms raised. Figures leaning forward. For an instant, the shadows resemble people in motion, moving with urgency, then breaking apart as the light changes. The effect is subtle enough to doubt. A trick of tired eyes. An overlap of angles and light. Yet those who witness it often experience a sudden tightness in the chest, a sensation that arrives before rational thought. The shapes do not feel random. They feel purposeful. Staff members have grown accustomed to these reports. They respond with patience and reassurance. Old buildings settle, they explain. Light behaves strangely at elevation. Smoke can linger in porous materials for decades. Their explanations are calm and practiced, yet they rarely linger in certain corridors after dark. Historians studying the lodge uncovered accounts from the night of the fire that were never widely shared. Survivors described confusion and disorientation as smoke filled the interior. Visibility dropped rapidly. Shadows moved erratically as flames reflected off walls and ceilings. People struggled to find exits that seemed to shift as panic grew. Most escaped. Some were guided by instinct rather than sight, following sounds and sudden openings in the smoke. The lodge itself seemed to channel movement, directing people away from collapse and toward safety. When the fire passed, those who returned spoke of the building as if it had made choices. Today, the structure remains largely unchanged in layout from that night. Hallways follow the same paths. Doorways open where they always have. The lodge remembers its own design, and perhaps more. Late at night, when the building settles and the mountain grows still, the shadows appear more clearly. They stretch across walls and ceilings, moving in silent urgency. Guests who watch too long feel a pull to follow them. A desire to understand where they are going. The sensation fades as quickly as it arrives, leaving only unease. The smell of smoke often returns during these moments, stronger than before. It carries a warmth that contrasts sharply with the cool mountain air. Some describe it as comforting. Others find it suffocating. No two experiences are identical, yet all share the same source, a fire that should be long gone. Maintenance crews report unusual temperature changes in certain rooms. Cold spots where heat should linger. Warmth where stone should remain cool. Instruments show nothing out of range. The anomalies exist only to those who feel them. Ashfall Mountain Lodge continues to welcome visitors year-round. Many leave with stories they hesitate to share, unsure how they will be received. Some return again and again, drawn by a connection they cannot explain. They speak of the lodge as if it is alive, not threatening, but aware. At dawn, sunlight fills the rooms and the shadows retreat. The smell of smoke disappears. The lodge feels peaceful, almost ordinary. Birds gather on the roof. Wind moves through the trees. The mountain resumes its quiet watch. Yet the fire is never truly gone. It lingers in the walls, in the air, in the paths of shadow that repeat themselves night after night. Ashfall Mountain Lodge stands as proof that survival leaves marks, and that places which endure great danger may carry those moments forward, replaying them softly for anyone willing to notice. The lodge survived the fire. But the fire never fully left the lodge. Silent Hearth Lodge stands deep within a pine valley where fog settles early and leaves late. From the outside, it looks built for comfort. Thick stone walls, a broad roofline, and tall chimneys suggest warmth and refuge against the cold mountain air. The lodge is centered around a massive fireplace, wide enough to dominate the main hall. Its stonework is darkened from years of use, and iron tools rest neatly beside it. Logs are stacked close by, dry and ready. Flames burn steadily when lit, bright and well fed, yet the air never seems to change. The air never seems to change. Guests notice it immediately. Coats stay on. Breath remains visible on colder nights. Hands held near the flames feel heat for a moment, but the warmth never spreads. It is as if the fire exists only for light, not comfort. The floors are always cool beneath foot. Wooden tables feel chilled to the touch. Even the stone hearth itself radiates no lasting warmth. Staff members explain it away as old construction or poor insulation, but the explanation never feels complete. As evening deepens, the lodge grows quieter. Conversations soften, then fade. The fire continues to crackle, its sound sharp against the stillness. It is during these hours that the hearth begins to draw attention for other reasons. Soft coughing is sometimes heard near the fire. It does not echo through the hall or come from any visible source. The sound is close, low, and restrained, as if someone is trying not to disturb others. Guests glance toward the hearth, expecting to see someone seated there, but the chairs remain empty. The coughing comes and goes, never growing severe, never fully stopping. Between these sounds, murmured voices sometimes follow. The words are indistinct, layered too softly to understand. They resemble fragments of conversation spoken under breath, not meant for listening ears. Those closest to the hearth describe the sensation of standing beside someone who is not fully present. The air feels denser there, pressing lightly against the chest. Breathing becomes more noticeable, measured and careful. The ash beneath the fire behaves strangely as well. After the flames settle and the logs collapse inward, the surface of the ash should remain still. Instead, it shifts. Fine gray powder slides slowly across the stone base, reshaping itself without wind or contact. The movement is subtle but deliberate, as though guided by unseen hands. When guests approach, the ash sometimes reveals faint impressions. Handprints. They are small and incomplete, lacking sharp edges, as if pressed gently into soft powder. Some appear stretched, fingers elongated beyond normal shape. Others fade almost immediately, leaving only suggestion behind. Staff members clean the hearth daily, yet the marks return. Fresh ash settles, smooth and untouched, only to change again after nightfall. No one has been seen touching the fire or the hearth during these times. The lodge has a long history, built as a winter refuge for travelers crossing the valley. Records mention harsh seasons when storms trapped people inside for days. Fires burned constantly then, and the hearth was the heart of survival. Illness was common in those early years. Cold, smoke, and close quarters took their toll. Some guests did not recover. The lodge continued to operate, carrying forward without pause, season after season. Those events are not openly discussed, but they linger in subtle ways. The hearth feels less like a source of life and more like a witness. It holds memory rather than heat. At night, guests report restless sleep. Rooms remain cold despite heavy blankets. Sounds from the main hall carry faintly upward, especially the coughing. It seems closer at night, drifting through the building without direction. Some guests wake with the sense that someone was standing near their bed, warming their hands that never truly warm. No footprints are found. Doors remain closed. Morning brings clarity but not comfort. The fire looks ordinary in daylight. Ash lies quiet. The hall feels empty, almost too large. Staff move through their routines as if nothing unusual occurred. Still, the cold persists. Even on sunny days, when light pours through the windows and snow melts outside, the lodge holds its chill. The hearth stands dark and patient, waiting for evening to return its quiet activity. Most guests do not stay long. One night is usually enough. They leave with vague discomfort rather than fear, unable to explain why the warmth never came. Those who remain longer grow accustomed to it, learning to sit near the fire for light rather than heat. Silent Hearth Lodge does not threaten or trap. It does not demand attention. Its presence is subdued, defined by absence rather than force. The cold is constant but not cruel. The sounds are soft, never alarming. What remains most unsettling is the sense that the hearth remembers those who once gathered around it seeking warmth that never fully arrived. The coughing and murmurs feel like echoes of endurance rather than warning. The handprints in the ash fade as quickly as they appear, leaving no proof behind. Only memory carries them forward. When guests step outside, the cold air feels no different from the air within. The lodge blends into the valley once more, quiet and unassuming. From a distance, smoke rises gently from the chimney, suggesting comfort that exists only in appearance. Silent Hearth Lodge continues to welcome travelers, offering shelter without warmth, light without comfort, and a reminder that some fires burn only to remember those who stood beside them. Widowa's Crest Lodge rests on a narrow rise overlooking a steep valley, where wind moves slowly and sound seems to sink rather than travel. The building is tall and pale, its wooden exterior weathered by years of snow and rain. From a distance it looks calm and dignified, but those who stay there often sense a weight that has nothing to do with altitude or weather. The lodge takes its name from a tragedy that occurred during its early years. Records describe an accident on the ridge path nearby, where a man lost his footing during a sudden storm and fell into the ravine below. Rescue efforts were delayed by weather and darkness. By the time help arrived, it was too late. His wife, who had been waiting at the lodge, never left the site during the search. After the accident, she remained at the lodge for weeks, standing for hours on the upper balcony that overlooks the valley. Staff members brought her food and blankets. But she rarely spoke. Each evening she returned to the same spot, watching the path disappear into mist. When she finally left, the lodge was renamed in quiet acknowledgement of what had happened. Guests often say the sadness lingers. From the first night, many feel it settle around them like a low pressure in the air. Rooms feel colder than expected, even when fires are burning. Conversations soften without intention. Laughter feels out of place, as if the walls themselves absorb sound and return only quiet. The balcony is where most sightings occur. Late at night or early in the morning, guests glance upward and see a woman standing alone near the railing. She wears dark clothing that moves gently, even when there is no wind. Her posture is still, her attention fixed on the valley below. Those who see her describe the same details. She never looks toward the lodge. She does not gesture or move away. She simply stands, hands resting lightly on the railing, as though waiting for something that never arrives. When approached, she vanishes. Witnesses report that the moment someone steps closer or calls out, the figure dissolves into the air, leaving the balcony empty. In her absence, an overwhelming chill spreads through the space. It is sudden and intense, cutting through clothing and skin alike. Breath fogs even in warm months. The cold fades only after several minutes, leaving behind a lingering ache. Staff members acknowledge the stories with careful restraint. They do not deny the sightings, but they do not encourage discussion either. They say the lodge has moods, and that guests should respect them. Many employees avoid the balcony after dark, choosing alternate routes even when it means extra effort. Historical notes reveal that the lodge experienced a noticeable change after the accident. Occupancy dropped for a time. Guests reported restless sleep and unexplained sadness. Some left early, unable to explain their discomfort. Others stayed longer than planned, drawn by a quiet gravity they could not name. Over the years, attempts were made to modernize the lodge. Heating systems were upgraded. Lighting was improved. Day with tilde copyright COR was refreshed. None of it altered the atmosphere completely. The sadness remained, subtle but persistent, like a memory the building refused to release. Those who stay multiple nights report vivid dreams. These dreams fade quickly upon waking, leaving behind only a sense of loss without a clear source. Psychologists suggest that the stories influence perception, shaping expectations into experience. Environmental factors such as altitude, isolation, and weather can affect mood. These explanations are reasonable, yet they do not account for the consistency of sightings or the sudden, localized cold that follows the woman's disappearance. Local residents speak of the lodge with quiet respect. They say the ridge remembers grief. That strong emotion, repeated day after day in one place, leaves an imprint. According to them, the woman never truly left. She simply became part of the view. On certain evenings, when fog rises from the valley and wraps the lodge in silence, the balcony light appears dimmer. Shadows gather near the railing. Guests watching from below feel a pull toward the height. No one has ever seen the woman step away on her own. She is only seen standing, waiting, and then gone. The chill that follows is not hostile. Feels like absence made physical, like the space left behind when something important is missing. By morning, the lodge returns to its familiar routine. Sunlight warms the wood. Staff prepare meals. Guests speak quietly over breakfast, often avoiding mention of the night before. Some decide not to extend their stay. Others book another night, hoping to understand what they felt. The lodge continues to welcome visitors. It offers comfort, shelter, and remarkable views. Yet it also carries the echo of a single moment that reshaped its identity. The sadness is not loud or dramatic. It is patient. Widow's Crest Lodge continues to welcome visitors. It offers comfort, shelter, and remarkable views. Yet it also carries the echo of a single moment that reshaped its identity. The sadness is not loud or dramatic. It is patient. And on the balcony, overlooking the valley where mist gathers and paths disappear, The woman in dark clothing is sometimes seen once more. She stands in silence, bound to memory and waiting. Before fading into cold air, leaving the lodge to hold what remains. Fog-bound Peak Lodge stands on a narrow ridge where the mountain rises just high enough to touch the clouds. Even on clear days, fog gathers here. It drifts in slow layers, wrapping the building and the surrounding rock as if guided by intention. Travelers climbing toward the lodge often break through sunlight only to enter a pale wall of mist that erases distance and sound within a few steps. From the outside, the lodge appears suspended. Its outline fades and sharpens repeatedly as fog thickens and thins. Trees nearby seem closer than they are, then suddenly far away. The mountain below disappears entirely, leaving only the sense that the building rests on nothing at all. The lodge was built as a waypoint for hikers and survey teams working the upper slopes. It was meant to be functional, not luxurious. Thick walls. Low ceilings. Windows designed to hold warmth rather than offer views. At the time, fog was considered a nuisance, nothing more. Guests began to notice how difficult it was to judge space once inside the fog. A short walk outside could feel endless. Sounds arrived late or not at all. Footsteps echoed without direction, returning from places that should not exist. Figures appeared first as movement. A shape crossing the fog just beyond the tree line. A person-sized outline walking parallel to the lodge, visible only for a second. Before dissolving back into white. Guests assumed other hikers were nearby, but no voices followed, and no one ever arrived at the door. Those who attempted to follow the figures quickly stopped. Visibility dropped within steps. The lodge vanished behind them, replaced by featureless fog that made it impossible to tell forward from back. Most turned around immediately, guided more by instinct than sight. When they returned, the lodge felt farther away than expected. Inside, time behaved strangely. Guests often arrived in the late afternoon, unpacked, and settled in. Only to glance at a clock and find that night had already fallen. Meals felt rushed or delayed without explanation. Conversations paused and resumed as if no time had passed. Even though hours had slipped away. Sleep was affected most. Some guests closed their eyes briefly and woke to morning light, convinced they had only rested for minutes. Others lay awake, listening to fog brush against the walls, and felt entire nights pass without fatigue. Caretakers noticed the same pattern. Watches and phones offered little clarity. Devices disagreed with each other, drifting by minutes or more over short periods. Routine tasks stretched unpredictably. A simple inspection could consume an afternoon. Logs kept meticulously showed gaps that could not be accounted for. Weather observations recorded at identical times differed from day to day, as if the fog altered perception before it altered instruments. Outside, the figures continued to appear. They walked slowly, never running, never approaching the lodge directly. Always just beyond visibility, where fog thickened enough to obscure details but thin enough to reveal motion. Some guests counted multiple figures moving in different directions, never colliding, never acknowledging each other. The figures cast no clear shadows. They seemed unaffected by terrain, passing where slopes dropped sharply or where trees should block movement. The fog bent around them, briefly outlining their shapes before closing again. No one ever saw a face. The feeling they left behind was not fear, but uncertainty. A subtle sense of being slightly out of sync with surroundings. Guests described moments where their thoughts felt delayed, as if reacting to events already finished. The loggia's history offers little explanation. There are no records of disaster at this location. No lost expedition. No mass disappearance. Instead, the mountain is known for its sudden weather shifts and dense cloud formations. Fog rises here even when conditions elsewhere remain stable, drawn upward by air currents that scientists still debate. Dense mist can disorient the brain, altering perception of time and movement. At altitude, oxygen levels shift subtly, affecting awareness. Combined, these factors may explain why fog-bound Peak Lodge feels disconnected from ordinary flow. But these explanations fail to account for consistency. Guests with no knowledge of the loggia's reputation report the same experiences. Figures at the edge of sight. Hours lost without memory. The sense that time stretches and compresses unevenly within the fog's reach. The fog never enters the lodge completely. It presses against windows. It curls along doorframes when opened. But inside, air remains clear. The boundary is precise, like a line drawn around the building. Beyond it, time loosens. Within it, structure holds. Some believe the lodge acts as an anchor. A fixed point within an environment where direction and duration dissolve. They walk endlessly, neither arriving nor leaving, existing only in the moments between visibility and absence. They stop checking clocks. They plan activities loosely. Anxiety fades, replaced by a quiet detachment. Fog thins as travelers descend. Watches realign. The body feels heavier, more grounded. Many are surprised to learn how much time passed during their stay, or how little. Some feel relief. Others feel a subtle loss, as if stepping back into a world that moves too quickly. Fog-bound Peak Lodge continues to operate, modest and rarely full. It attracts those seeking isolation, unaware that isolation here extends beyond space and into time itself. The fog gathers daily, patient and familiar. Figures walk its edges, just out of sight. And within that pale boundary, hours slip past unnoticed, carried away by the mountain's quiet breath, leaving only the feeling that something important almost happened, and will continue to almost happen, as long as the fog remains. Broken Compass Lodge rests at the edge of a wide plateau where forests thin and the land opens into long, confusing distances. On foot, however, the area feels disordered, as though space itself refuses to settle into a single shape. Travelers approaching the lodge often sense the change before they see the building. Trails curve unexpectedly. Familiar landmarks seem to drift from where they should be. A hill appears closer than expected, then farther away moments later. Distances stretch and compress without explanation. Digital devices behave no better. Paths that should intersect do not. Needles hesitate, shivering instead of settling. Compasses fail first. Some spin slowly. Others point confidently in a direction that leads nowhere. Some spin slowly. Others point confidently in a direction that leads nowhere. Others point confidently in a direction that leads nowhere. The air feels still, yet progress becomes uncertain. 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 Most people assume user error. Fatigue. Poor signal. Misreading the land. They adjust, recalibrate, and continue. They still arrive disoriented. Broken Compass Lodge stands solid and unassuming, built of timber and stone, its roof low and wide to withstand weather. The building offers warmth and rest, a reassuring presence after the confusion outside. Guests step inside relieved, convinced the unease will fade with shelter. Inside, directions seem to return. Hallways are straight. Doors lead where expected. The lodge feels grounded, almost deliberately so, as if designed to counter what surrounds it. Yet the sense of displacement never fully leaves. Guests describe difficulty remembering which side of the building faces the forest and which faces open land. Windows offer views that feel unfamiliar from one room to the next. The sun appears to set in different places depending on where one stands. People trace routes with their fingers, only to lose confidence halfway through. The lodge staff offers simple guidance, spoken calmly, never questioning the confusion. They have seen it many times before. Night brings the second sign. It begins softly, a faint sound above the ceiling, easily mistaken for wind or settling beams. Then it becomes distinct. Footsteps. They move slowly across the roof, measured and deliberate. Each step lands with careful weight, heel to toe, as though the person walking knows exactly where they are going. The pacing follows a straight line, then turns, then reverses. They trace the same path again and again, back and forth, back and forth. No voices accompany them. No shifting gravel. No scrape of tools. Just the steady sound of movement overhead. Those who investigate find nothing. The roof is steep and exposed. Access is difficult even in daylight. At night, wind and darkness make it nearly impossible. Yet the footsteps continue, unaffected by weather. Some guests report the sound stopping directly above their room. The pacing slows, as if pausing to consider something below. Then it resumes, moving away, continuing its circuit. Sleep becomes uneven. Dreams fill with images of walking without destination, of choosing paths that fold back on themselves, of standing still while the world rotates gently around them. Morning light restores some clarity. The roof is empty. No marks disturb the surface. No signs of movement remain. Staff members show no surprise when asked. They offer warm drinks and suggest rest before travel. Those who leave too quickly often become lost again. Even with clear skies and fresh directions, paths twist. Locals speak quietly about the land. They say the plateau lacks a true center. That it bends space just enough to confuse intention. Some believe old survey lines crossed here. Never properly reconciled. Others say the area was always difficult. Avoided long before the lodge was built. The footsteps, according to those stories, belong to a watcher. Not a guardian, not a threat, but something that walks the highest line, maintaining balance. The pacing above the lodge is said to mirror the uncertainty below. A constant recalibration, a reminder that direction is not guaranteed. Those who stay longer notice subtle patterns. The footsteps begin at the same time each night. The pacing aligns with shifts in wind. With changes in pressure. With moments when guests feel most uncertain. It is as though the sound responds to confusion, moving when direction is questioned. Some guests try to follow the sound mentally, mapping its route across the roof. They find themselves calming as they do, anchoring their thoughts to the rhythm. Others feel unease deepen, the realization settling that the walker above never chooses a final direction. Broken Compass Lodge remains open to travelers seeking solitude and challenge. Many come for the quiet, for the landscape that forces attention inward. Some leave frustrated, eager to regain certainty elsewhere. A few leave changed. They speak less about maps and more about awareness. About moving slowly. About listening. Direction matters less than intention. Sometimes knowing where you are is less important than accepting that you are between places. At night, as the lodge settles and the land grows quiet, the footsteps return to the roof. They pace patiently under the stars, tracing a line that leads nowhere and everywhere at once. And below, in rooms filled with waiting travelers, the sense of direction loosens its grip, reminding all who stay that not every journey is meant to point forward, and not every path is meant to be fixed. Nightwind Summit Lodge clings to the highest ridge of the mountain, where the land drops away on all sides and the sky feels uncomfortably close. The structure was built for endurance, anchored deep into rock, its beams braced against weather that never truly rests. Even on clear days, the air around the lodge moves with purpose, sliding and curling as if searching for weaknesses. The wind is never silent here. From the moment visitors arrive, they hear it. A constant scream that wraps around the building, rising and falling but never stopping. Locals say the mountain funnels air through this summit in a way that amplifies every gust, turning ordinary wind into something relentless. At first, the sound feels natural. Predictable. Another feature of high elevation. But as hours pass, the wind begins to change. It no longer sounds empty. Late in the evening, when daylight drains from the sky and the temperature drops sharply, the wind carries something else within it. Between the howls and bursts, guests begin to notice softer sounds riding the gusts. Faint murmurs that do not match the rhythm of the air. Whispered syllables that seem almost deliberate. Some hear their name spoken just clearly enough to notice. Others hear short phrases, warnings that dissolve before they can be understood. The voices never repeat the same way twice, and they never sound close. They feel distant, as though carried from far across the mountain. Stepping outside only sharpens the effect. The wind strikes with full force on the exposed ridge, pushing against the body and stealing breath. The whispers grow louder here, overlapping and blending into the roar. It becomes difficult to tell where the wind ends and the voices begin. Many visitors retreat quickly, unsettled by the sense that the mountain itself is speaking through the air. Inside the lodge, there is little refuge. Despite careful construction, the wind finds its way in. It creeps through unseen gaps, chilling hallways and corners. Doors that were firmly shut begin to move. Then, without warning, they swing open. The effect is sudden and dramatic. Freezing air rushes inside, flooding rooms in seconds. Curtains billow violently. Lamps flicker. The temperature drops so fast that breath becomes visible. Guests scramble to close doors that seemed secure moments earlier. When they do, the handles feel cold, as if the metal has been exposed to the open sky. Staff members are accustomed to this behavior. They check latches and hinges daily. They explain that pressure differences at the summit can overpower even well-fitted doors. They favor certain rooms, certain hallways, and always during the deepest hours of night. Historical records offer some insight into the loggia's reputation. Nightwind Summit Lodge was built near an old mountain pass once used by early travelers and guides. The route was dangerous, exposed to sudden storms and brutal cold. Journals from that era describe voices carried on the wind, sometimes credited with saving lives, sometimes with leading travelers astray. The summit was considered a place to listen carefully, not to speak. When the lodge was constructed, workers reported constant noise even on calm days. Tools vibrated unexpectedly. Spoken words were lost in the air before reaching nearby ears. Some claimed the wind reacted to human presence, strengthening when arguments broke out, easing when the site was quiet. Over time, these stories faded into background lore, shared more as curiosity than caution. Modern guests experienced the same patterns without knowing the history. They described feeling watched, not by eyes, but by awareness carried in motion. The wind seems to follow individuals as they move through the lodge, rising suddenly near stairwells or doors. It presses hardest when someone hesitates, as if urging a decision. Sleep is difficult at Nightwind Summit Lodge. The sound never fully recedes. Even thick walls cannot block the screams outside. During lighter moments, the wind hums like distant voices speaking in unison. During stronger gusts, it crashes against the structure with enough force to shake beds and rattle frames. In these moments, the whispers become more distinct. Guests wake to the sensation that someone is speaking just outside their door. The words are unclear, carried away before meaning forms. Some rise and open the door, only to be met by a blast of icy air and an empty hallway. Others stay still, listening as the sound moves on. Maintenance crews have found doors open in the morning that were confirmed shut the night before. Frost lines trace across floors where cold air surged in for extended periods. Yet no damage is ever found. The lodge endures, as it was built to do. During severe weather, the mountain reveals its full voice. Storms gather quickly at the summit, and the wind transforms into something almost alive. The wind transforms into something almost alive. It circles the lodge repeatedly. It circles the lodge repeatedly. Striking from different angles. Striking from different angles. Voices overlap and intensify. Voices overlap and intensify. Layering warnings that feel urgent even when unintelligible. Layering warnings that feel urgent even when unintelligible. Those inside often feel a growing sense of pressure. Those inside often feel a growing sense of pressure. A need to remain alert. A need to remain alert. Some interpret the whispers as caution. Some interpret the whispers as caution. Others hear invitation. Others hear invitation. The difference seems personal, shaped by the listener rather than the sound itself. As dawn approaches, the wind gradually loosens its grip. The screams soften into steady movement. The voices fade back into the air, indistinguishable from ordinary sound. Doors remain closed. Warmth slowly returns to the rooms. Morning light reveals a peaceful summit. Snow glitters. Clouds drift lazily. From a distance, Nightwind Summit Lodge appears calm and silent, its struggle with the air hidden from view. Guests gather their belongings and descend the mountain. Many are unsure how to describe the night they experienced. They speak of wind, of cold, of restless sleep. Few mention the voices aloud. The lodge remains behind, standing firm against the sky. As evening returns, the wind rises once more, racing up the slopes toward the summit. Nightwind Summit Lodge listens, doors waiting, walls braced, ready to receive whatever the mountain chooses to carry in its breath. Hemlock Shadow Lodge rests beneath a dense canopy of towering trees that seem to drink the daylight before it can reach the ground. The hemlocks grow close together here, their branches overlapping and knitting the sky into a dark ceiling. Even at midday, the forest floor remains dim, lit by a muted green glow that never quite becomes sunlight. The lodge was built deliberately in this place, intended as a quiet retreat for travelers seeking shelter and isolation. From the outside, it appears sturdy and well kept. Wood walls are darkened by age and moisture. Windows reflect the forest more than the sky. The building feels absorbed into its surroundings, as if it grew alongside the trees rather than being placed among them. Inside, the darkness deepens. Rooms feel several shades dimmer than expected, regardless of the hour. Curtains pulled back reveal little more than shadowed trunks and still branches. Electric lights function normally, yet their reach feels limited, as though the air itself resists illumination. Corners remain dark no matter how many lamps are switched on. Guests often comment on how quickly their eyes strain. Reading takes effort. Details soften. Movement at the edge of vision becomes more noticeable, drawing attention without clear cause. The lodge is quiet, but the silence feels weighted, pressing gently against awareness. The hemlock forest absorbs sound as effectively as it blocks light. Footsteps outside fade quickly. Wind moves high above the roof, stirring branches that cannot be seen. Indoors, voices travel only short distances before dissolving, leaving rooms feeling isolated even when occupied. It is in this environment that the shadows begin to draw notice. At first, they appear ordinary. Shapes cast by furniture, beams, and window frames stretch across walls and floors. As the sun shifts outside, these shadows should change. Most do. Some do not. Guests report seeing dark shapes that linger when light changes, remaining fixed while other shadows move. In some cases, these shapes slide slowly across surfaces without any shift in lighting. They do not flicker or jump. Their movement is smooth and deliberate. One common report involves hallways late at night. A guest steps out of a room and notices a shadow crossing the corridor ahead. It resembles a human outline but lacks detail, more suggestion than form. When approached, it continues on, turning corners where no light source supports its shape. Rooms present similar experiences. A lamp remains steady on a bedside table, yet a shadow stretches along the wall as if something passed between the light and the surface. Nothing is there. The shadow fades slowly rather than snapping back into place. The most unsettling aspect is the independence of these movements. Shadows respond neither to changes in light nor to the presence of objects. They appear to follow their own rules, interacting with space rather than illumination. Staff members acknowledge the unusual darkness but offer practical explanations. Thick trees reduce daylight. Dark wood absorbs light. Old buildings have quirks. These explanations satisfy most guests until they witness something that resists logic. Despite these experiences, the lodge remains calm. There are no sudden noises or aggressive sensations. The atmosphere encourages stillness rather than fear. Shadows do not rush or threaten. They simply exist, sharing the space. The history of the lodge provides subtle context. It was built during a period when the forest was considered both resource and barrier. The hemlocks were valued for their timber but feared for their density. Paths through the woods were easy to lose. Orientation depended on light that rarely reached the ground. Early visitors wrote of feeling watched by the forest itself, not by animals, but by the absence of visibility. The lodge became a place to wait for daylight before continuing travel. Darkness was something to endure rather than avoid. That relationship with shadow seems preserved within the building. The lodge does not repel darkness. It accommodates it. Walls and ceilings accept shade as a permanent feature rather than a temporary condition. At night, the effect intensifies. Exterior lights illuminate only a small radius before being swallowed by trees. Inside, rooms feel enclosed, defined more by darkness than structure. Shadows deepen and layer over one another, creating depth where none should exist. Some guests describe moments when shadows appear to observe. Not through eyes or form, but through positioning. A dark shape lingers in a doorway longer than expected. A shadow rests near a chair as if occupying it. These impressions are subtle and easily dismissed, yet persistent. Morning brings little relief. The forest remains dim even as daylight increases elsewhere. The lodge never fully brightens. Shadows soften but do not disappear. They retreat slightly, becoming less active, less noticeable, but always present. Most guests leave with mixed feelings. There is no single event to point to, no clear explanation to provide. The memory is atmospheric rather than specific. Darkness felt deeper here. Shadows felt different. Hemlock Shadow Lodge does not claim to be haunted. It does not advertise mystery. It offers shelter and quiet, and it delivers both. The unusual behavior of shadows remains an unspoken feature, experienced rather than explained. Those who stay long enough learn to move slowly, to rely less on sight and more on awareness. They notice how sound, space, and light interact differently here. The brightness feels sudden and sharp. Shadows behave normally again, tied obediently to light and object. The world feels restored to familiar rules. Behind them, the lodge remains where it is. Held beneath tall trees that guard their darkness carefully. Inside those walls, shadows continue to move as they always have. Independent, quiet, and unhurried. Part of a place where light has never fully been in control. Driftwood Ridge Lodge stands on a windswept rise above a long curve of water, its shape uneven and organic, as if grown rather than built. Every beam and plank was salvaged, carried up from riverbanks and shorelines where storms had discarded them. The builders believed the wood carried strength earned through travel, shaped by water and time. What they did not expect was how much of that journey the wood would remember. From the moment the lodge was finished, it never fully settled. Even on calm days, the structure creaked softly, a constant low chorus of movement. Guests learned quickly that silence did not exist here. The lodge was always speaking in its own language. The sounds grew louder, stretching through halls and ceilings like slow breathing. During daylight, the place feels warm and textured. Walls ripple with grain and knots, each board marked by years of exposure before being reclaimed. Sunlight slides along the curves of the wood, highlighting patterns that seem almost intentional. Visitors run their hands along the walls and remark on how alive the building feels. Night reveals another side. As temperatures drop, the creaking deepens. Boards contract and shift, producing sharp pops and long groans that echo through the rooms. Then the knocking begins. The knocks come from inside the walls. They are slow and deliberate, spaced just far enough apart to demand attention. Guests describe them as coming from specific places, behind headboards, beneath stairwells, along narrow corridors where no pipes or supports should be. The sound resembles knuckles against wood, firm but restrained, as if testing for weakness. Some guests knock back, half amused, half curious. The response is immediate. Another knock answers from deeper within the wall, slightly off rhythm, as though adjusting to the exchange. These interactions rarely last long. The knocking fades after a few moments, leaving behind a tension that lingers far longer than the sound itself. As stories spread, more unsettling reports followed. Guests sitting quietly by lamplight noticed shapes forming in the wood grain. Faces appeared briefly in the patterns, subtle and fleeting. Eyes suggested by knots. Mouths traced by darker lines. The expressions were not exaggerated or threatening. They looked neutral, almost contemplative, before dissolving back into ordinary texture. Witnesses struggled to describe what they saw. The faces were never fully formed. They emerged only when viewed from certain angles, vanishing the moment attention shifted or light changed. Many assumed imagination was at work, influenced by fatigue and suggestion. Yet the sightings repeated with remarkable consistency. Different guests, unaware of previous reports, described similar features in different rooms. Always brief. Always silent. Always gone before anyone else could be called to see. Staff members listened carefully but offered no firm explanations. They explained that reclaimed wood carries irregular grain and unusual stress patterns. As for the knocking, they cited temperature changes and internal movement. Reasonable answers, delivered calmly. Still, even long-time employees admitted discomfort. Some avoided certain hallways at night. Others refused to sleep in rooms where the knocking was strongest. One caretaker described the sensation of being watched by the walls themselves, not with intent, but with attention. Local history adds another layer. The salvaged wood came from many sources. Old docks dismantled after storms. River barges broken apart after years of service. Old docks dismantled after storms. River barges broken apart after years of service. Fragments of abandoned buildings reclaimed before collapse. Old docks dismantled after storms. River barges broken apart after years of service. Fragments of abandoned buildings reclaimed before collapse. Each piece carried traces of different lives and uses. Old docks dismantled after storms. River barges broken apart after years of service. Fragments of abandoned buildings reclaimed before collapse. Each piece carried traces of different lives and uses. The lodge became a gathering place for these fragments, a convergence of journeys that never fully ended. Old docks dismantled after storms. River barges broken apart after years of service. Fragments of abandoned buildings reclaimed before collapse. Each piece carried traces of different lives and uses. The lodge became a gathering place for these fragments, a convergence of journeys that never fully ended. Old docks dismantled after storms. River barges broken apart after years of service. Fragments of abandoned buildings reclaimed before collapse. Each piece carried traces of different lives and uses. The lodge became a gathering place for these fragments, a convergence of journeys that never fully ended. The wood, shaped by movement and pressure, retained an awareness of being used, struck, and leaned upon. Old docks dismantled after storms. River barges broken apart after years of service. Fragments of abandoned buildings reclaimed before collapse. Each piece carried traces of different lives and uses. The lodge became a gathering place for these fragments, a convergence of journeys that never fully ended. The wood, shaped by movement and pressure, retained an awareness of being used, struck, and leaned upon. In this view, the creaking is not decay, but memory in motion. On nights when wind rises from the water below, the knocking grows more frequent. It travels through the lodge, room to room, as if following guests as they move. As if following guests as they move. The faces appear more often then, briefly catching in peripheral vision before slipping away. Sleep becomes shallow, interrupted by the sense that something is just beyond understanding. Despite the unease, few experiences feel openly hostile. The lodge does not threaten. It does not chase or trap. It persists. It makes itself known. Some guests report moments of unexpected calm. Sitting alone in the common room late at night, listening to the creak settle into a steady rhythm. They feel oddly accompanied. For a time the lodge feels less like a building. By morning everything appears unchanged. The wood is still, the walls show only grain and polish. Guests speak quietly over breakfast. Some laugh it off, others choose not to mention it at all. Many leave with mixed feelings. Unease, curiosity, and a lingering sense of having stayed somewhere that noticed them in return. A few return, drawn back by the mystery, wanting to listen again. Faces appear and fade in shifting light. Driftwood Ridge Lodge continues to stand, held together by salvaged timber and quiet endurance. Knocks echo from within its walls. The lodge does not explain itself. It does not need to. Built from wood that traveled far before finding rest. It remains in motion, remembering each guest who passes through. And quietly reminding them that even reclaimed things can carry voices that never fully fall silent. From the road below, the lodge appears and disappears as the ascent continues. Clouds thicken with every turn, pressing low against the slope until the sky becomes a single, unbroken gray. By the time travelers reach the entrance, there is no sense of weather beyond the fog. No sun. No stars. Only a ceiling of cloud that never lifts. Locals say the sky above the lodge has been hidden for as long as anyone can remember. Even on days when nearby peaks stand clear and bright, Starless Peak remains sealed beneath cover. Clouds cling to it with unusual persistence, sliding slowly across the roof and walls. Muffling sound and softening edges. Light never arrives directly. It filters down weakly, as if strained through layers too thick to penetrate. The lodge was built to serve climbers and survey crews working the upper mountain. Its location offered shelter in a dangerous stretch of terrain where weather could turn without warning. Thick stone walls and narrow windows were chosen for durability, not comfort. No one expected the sky itself to become the most unsettling feature. Guests often notice the darkness first. They arrive in late afternoon expecting fading light, only to find the interior already dim. Outside, clouds press close enough to the windows that distance disappears. The world beyond the glass feels shallow, unfinished. Night comes quietly. There is no visible transition. No sunset. Darkness simply deepens until interior lights become the only reference. Guests wake expecting early light to seep through curtains, but the rooms remain black. The same heavy darkness fills the space, unchanged. Some reach for clocks or phones, startled to learn it is already dawn. Outside, the clouds remain fixed, absorbing what little light the day offers. Breakfast is served under lamps that never feel temporary. The absence of sky alters perception. Without sun or stars, time loses its familiar markers. Meals blur together. Sleep feels incomplete or excessive. Guests nap unintentionally and wake disoriented, unsure how long they were resting. It is during these nights that the most disturbing reports emerge. Guests wake suddenly, not from sound, but from awareness. A sense that the room is no longer empty. Eyes adjust slowly in the darkness, revealing shapes that should not be there. Figures stand at the foot of the bed. They are upright and still, outlined faintly against darker shadow. Not solid enough to define features, yet unmistakably present. They do not move. They simply stand, facing the sleeper in silence. The moment lasts only seconds. As guests attempt to speak or move, the figures dissolve. Not retreating, not fading gradually, but vanishing as if the darkness itself reshapes and forgets them. No footprints are found. No doors open. No curtains move. Some guests assume the experience was a dream. Yet too many describe the same details. The position at the foot of the bed. The silence. The certainty of being observed rather than threatened. Staff have learned to recognize the look guests carry to breakfast after such nights, unsettled but unable to explain why. Caretakers assigned to the lodge report similar encounters. Those staying long-term claim the darkness itself feels layered, as though different depths exist within it. Moving through hallways at night, they sense shapes just beyond the reach of light, never fully revealed. Investigations offer limited explanations. Meteorologists note the lodge sits in a rare convergence of air currents that trap cloud cover. Temperature inversions and moisture patterns keep the sky sealed, sometimes for weeks. Without sunlight, circadian rhythms falter, leading to vivid waking dreams and disorientation. These explanations address part of the experience, but not all. The figures do not behave like hallucinations. They are consistent in position and timing. They appear during the deepest hours of night, when the cloud cover is thickest and the lodge feels most cut off from the world. The mountain's history adds quiet weight. Before the lodge existed, this peak was avoided during long crossings. Travelers noted how quickly light vanished here, even during clear seasons. Some described nights where darkness arrived early and lingered too long, forcing them to camp in unfamiliar places without guidance from the sky. There are no recorded tragedies tied directly to the site. Instead, the mountain seems to collect isolation. Moments when people stood alone beneath a sky that offered no reference. No stars to navigate by. No dawn to promise relief. Guests who experience the figures often describe a strange calm afterward. Fear comes later, once the moment is analyzed. In the instant itself, there is only recognition. A sense that the figure belongs there, in that darkness, at that distance. As if it has always stood there, waiting for the sleeper to wake. Over time, some guests begin to sleep with lights on. Others leave early, unable to tolerate the nights. A few stay longer, drawn by the sensation that time has slowed, that the world beyond the clouds no longer presses in. Leaving Starless Peak Lodge brings an abrupt return. As travelers descend, clouds thin suddenly. Light floods back with startling intensity. The sky opens wide, revealing sun or stars that feel almost intrusive. Many pause on the road, overwhelmed by how bright the world seems. Clocks realign. Sleep patterns return. The figures do not follow. Starless Peak Lodge remains where it is, sealed beneath its permanent cover. Guests continue to arrive seeking solitude, unaware of the particular kind of darkness that awaits them. Clouds gather above without break. Dawn arrives without light. And in the deepest hours of night, when the sky offers no guidance and time feels suspended, figures stand silently at the foot of beds, watching until the darkness closes around them once more. Icefall Hollow Lodge stands where the forest thins and stone walls rise, facing a frozen waterfall that never fully rests. Even in the coldest months, when snow blankets the ground and branches crack under weight, the waterfall continues to move beneath its frozen skin. Water runs behind ice, pressing and pulling, shaping a solid curtain that glows pale blue in daylight. The lodge was built close to this feature, close enough that sound travels easily between ice and timber. From the outside, the building appears sturdy and practical, designed to withstand cold and isolation. Thick logs, narrow windows, a roof pitched steep to shed snow. Visitors come for quiet, for the rare beauty of winter preserved through every season. They arrive and notice the first sound almost immediately. A sharp crack echoes through the hollow, sudden and clean. It comes from the waterfall, a deep internal shift as ice tightens or releases. The sound repeats at irregular intervals, sometimes distant, sometimes alarmingly close. The air seems to carry it directly into the lodge walls, where it resonates and fades slowly. Staff explain that ice moves. Pressure builds and breaks. The sounds are natural, expected. Most guests accept this explanation during the day. When sunlight warms the stone and the waterfall looks like sculpted glass. At night, the sounds change. The cracking becomes layered, overlapping, traveling through the ice in long vibrations. The lodge seems to hum faintly in response. Floors tremble almost imperceptibly. Window panes quiver and settle. Sleep comes lightly, interrupted by the sense that something is shifting nearby. Then there are the screams. They do not arrive suddenly. They stretch into hearing, thin and distorted, carried through ice and water until they barely resemble voices. Some guests think they are wind at first, forced through narrow channels. Others assume wildlife, distant and strained by the frozen air. But the sounds repeat with unsettling consistency. They rise and fall, echoing within the waterfall itself, as though the ice is shaping them, bending them into something almost recognizable. The tone is distant, neither close nor far, suspended in a place that does not exist on land or water. Those who step outside to listen feel the sound move through their bodies. Vibrates against the chest, passes through bone, then disappears. No direction can be identified. The sound comes from everywhere the ice stands. Staff members rarely go out at night unless necessary. They say the ice carries more than sound after dark. It carries memory. The waterfall has frozen and thawed countless times over the years. Each season adds new layers, trapping air, debris, and patterns within. Guests report seeing outlines within the frozen sheet, forms that resemble figures pressed into the ice. A curve that suggests a shoulder. A hollow where a face might be. Limbs implied by shadows rather than lines. The figures do not appear everywhere. In the morning, when the sun strikes the waterfall from the side, shadows deepen and shapes emerge. By afternoon, the sun strikes the waterfall from a different angle, and the figures fade again, returning the ice to abstraction. Those who see the figures often feel an immediate need to look away. The longer they stare, the more defined the shapes seem to become. The mind fills gaps the ice does not provide. Imagination completes what is only suggested. Some guests report that the figures appear closer at night, as if the darkness draws them forward. Lantern light cast across the ice causes shadows to stretch and compress, giving the illusion of movement where none exists. The lodge itself responds to the presence of the waterfall. The cracking sounds echo through beams and walls. Doors shiver faintly. Objects on shelves shift just enough to be noticed. It feels as though the building is not separate from the ice, but connected to it by vibration and cold. Sleep is often disturbed by sound. A long crack rolls through the hollow, followed by a pause so complete it feels deliberate. Then a faint cry, distant and altered, rises and fades. Guests wake unsure if they heard anything at all. The silence afterward feels heavy, as though something has passed. In the morning, conversations are cautious. People ask if others heard the sounds. Answers vary. Some heard nothing. Others describe nearly identical experiences. A few choose not to speak at all, their attention drawn repeatedly to the waterfall outside. There are no official records of anyone being lost within the icefall. No confirmed incidents, no names attached to the stories. Yet locals speak of travelers from long ago who attempted to climb the frozen cascade, believing it solid, believing it safe. They say the ice remembers pressure. Each season, the waterfall freezes around what presses against it. Sound, vibration, shape, all held briefly before being released or buried deeper. The cracks are not warnings, but adjustments. The screams are not voices, but echoes of strain moving through frozen layers. Those who stay longer begin to notice a pattern. The sounds are strongest during temperature shifts, when the ice tightens or loosens its grip. When the waterfall grows thick and opaque. No one has ever seen a figure change position. No one has seen one emerge. Still, the feeling persists that the ice is holding more than water. Icefall Hollow Lodge remains open throughout the year. Visitors continue to arrive, drawn by isolation and beauty. Many leave with stories of sound and shadow, uncertain how much was natural and how much was something else. They describe the hollow as a place where motion is slowed and preserved, where sound does not fade but lingers, reshaped by cold. They say the waterfall feels aware, not alive, but responsive, reacting to presence with creaks and cracks and distant cries. They leave with a deeper impression. At night, when the lodge settles and the forest grows still, the ice continues its quiet work. It shifts, tightens, releases. Sound travels through frozen layers, carrying impressions from deep within. And as the waterfall glows faintly under moonlight, the shapes within remain suspended, neither moving nor disappearing, waiting for the next change in cold to speak again through ice and stone. Old Ranger S. Rest Lodge sits deep within a stretch of forest that grows quieter with every mile traveled. The road leading to it narrows gradually, trees leaning inward as if guiding visitors toward something meant to remain secluded. The lodge appears suddenly between trunks, modest in size, built for function rather than comfort. Weathered wood, a stone chimney, and a porch that creaks even without footsteps. For many years, this lodge was home to a single ranger. He lived alone, tasked with watching over the surrounding land through long seasons of isolation. Records describe him as methodical and reserved, a man who preferred routine to conversation. His days followed a steady rhythm. Morning patrols. Equipment checks. Evenings spent by the fireplace, documenting weather patterns and trail conditions. The lodge was never meant to house more than one person, and it never did. When the ranger retired, the lodge was left as it was. Furniture remained in place. Tools hung on their hooks. A chair sat near the fireplace, angled slightly toward the hearth. Time passed quietly. The forest reclaimed its sounds. Wind moved through the trees. Animals returned to paths once cleared by boots. The lodge waited. Those who stay there now describe an immediate sense of presence. The air inside feels settled, not abandoned. Dust gathers slowly, as if disturbed regularly. Floors creak in familiar patterns, suggesting movement rather than decay. Visitors often remark that the lodge feels occupied, though no one else is visible. The sensation is subtle but persistent, like entering a room moments after someone else has left. Nightfall brings the most activity. As darkness spreads through the forest, the lodge grows unusually attentive. Sounds sharpen. Small noises carry farther. Guests freeze when they hear it for the first time. After midnight, footsteps begin to climb the stairs. The steps are slow and deliberate, matching the spacing of the old wooden treads. Each one lands where a foot would naturally fall, never rushing, never hesitating. The staircase is visible from the main room. Empty. Still. And yet the sound continues, rising step by step until it reaches the upper floor. Doors upstairs remain closed. Nothing follows. After a brief pause, silence returns, as complete as if nothing happened at all. Those who investigate find no explanation. The stairs are solid. No animals have access to the interior. The pattern repeats nightly, always at the same hour, always the same pace. Some guests choose to remain awake to listen. Others retreat beneath blankets, counting the steps until they stop. Downstairs, the fireplace area becomes the focus of attention. Near the hearth sits the old wooden chair, its runners worn smooth by years of use. During the day, it rests perfectly still. At night, it begins to move. Not suddenly, not dramatically. Just enough to be noticed. A slow, gentle rocking, as if responding to a familiar presence. The motion is easy to miss at first. Guests glance toward the chair and look away, assuming the movement was imagined. When they look again, the chair has shifted slightly, angled differently toward the fire. Those who sit quietly and watch see it rock forward and back, stopping only when directly observed for too long. No breeze reaches that corner. The fireplace is cold. Floors beneath the chair are level and firm. Still, the rocking returns night after night, always subtle, always controlled. Former caretakers of the lodge speak cautiously about these occurrences. They do not deny them, but they do not encourage discussion. The ranger lived a solitary life, they explain. He spent decades alone in this space. Habits form deeply in isolation. Some routines leave marks that do not fade easily. Old journals recovered from the lodge describe nights spent listening to the forest. The ranger wrote of footsteps outside that never approached. Of sounds on the stairs that reassured him he was not entirely alone. He documented the comfort of the chair by the fire, rocking gently as he reviewed his notes. The motion helped him think. When the ranger passed away, it was elsewhere, far from the lodge. Yet the routines he built remained anchored to this place. The forest accepted them. The lodge absorbed them. Visitors often report a feeling of calm mixed with unease. The presence does not feel hostile. It feels attentive. Protective. Like someone keeping watch. Some guests sense that they are being checked on rather than followed. The footsteps stop at the top of the stairs, never entering occupied rooms. The chair rocks near the fire, facing inward, not toward those watching. Sleep comes unevenly. Dreams are vivid but quiet. Images of walking trails, steady hands, measured steps. Guests wake feeling rested but unsettled, as if they shared the night with someone who never spoke. Morning light softens the lodge, revealing nothing out of place. The chair sits still. The stairs are silent. Yet the feeling of occupation lingers. Those who stay multiple nights notice small changes. A log placed near the fireplace shifts position. A door left ajar is found closed. Windows reflect movement that vanishes when approached. None of it feels accidental. None of it feels threatening. Old Ranger's Rest Lodge does not announce its presence. It does not seek attention. It simply continues. The ranger's role was to watch, to maintain, to remain alert while others passed through unaware. Perhaps that purpose never ended. Perhaps the lodge itself learned how to keep vigil. As visitors depart, many pause on the porch, struck by a sense of being seen off. The forest remains still. The lodge stands quiet behind them. No movement shows in the windows. But when night returns, footsteps climb the stairs once more. The chair rocks gently near the fireplace. An old ranger's rest lodge carries on as it always has. Occupied, attentive, and never truly alone. Final Ascent Lodge stands above the tree line where the mountain narrows into stone and wind. The road that reaches it climbs in long, careful turns, then ends without ceremony in a small clearing carved from snow and rock. From here, the land drops away in every direction. Clouds move at eye level. The air feels thinner, sharper, as if the world has been reduced to essentials. The lodge was built to serve climbers and winter travelers who needed shelter before the final push or a safe pause on the way down. Its walls are thick, reinforced against storms that arrive without warning. Windows are narrow, designed to hold warmth and resist drifting snow. From the outside, it looks solid and dependable, a refuge earned through effort. Arrival, however, brings an immediate and unexpected reaction. Visitors often describe a wave of dread that settles in as soon as they step out of their vehicles or off the trail. It does not announce itself with fear or panic. It arrives quietly, a heavy awareness that something is wrong. The feeling is physical as much as emotional, a tightening in the chest, a sense of being exposed despite the walls nearby. The lodge staff attribute this reaction to altitude and fatigue. The climb is demanding. Oxygen is scarce. Weather shifts rapidly. These explanations are reasonable, and many accept them. Yet even experienced climbers report the same unease, despite preparation and familiarity with high places. The dread does not fade indoors. It settles instead, becoming part of the atmosphere. Conversations remain brief. Voices lower naturally. Even laughter sounds restrained, as though the walls absorb enthusiasm before it can spread. Windows reveal little. Snow reflects light upward, flattening the view into pale brightness during the day and deep shadow at night. The horizon feels close, pressing in rather than expanding outward. Looking outside brings no sense of freedom, only distance and exposure. The dread does not fade indoors. As evening falls, the isolation becomes more pronounced. Wind rises around the lodge, circling it with steady pressure. Snow shifts against the walls in soft, persistent waves. Inside, the sounds are muted, as though the mountain itself is listening. It is after night fully settles that the voices begin. They do not start abruptly. At first, they are mistaken for wind slipping through seams or vents. Low tones rise and fall, blending with the storm. Over time, patterns emerge. The sounds resolve into words, quiet and measured, spoken close enough to feel personal. The voices urge guests to step outside. They speak of release, of silence, of an end to effort. They promise rest in the open snow, beyond walls and obligation. The tone is not threatening. It is calm, reassuring, and persistent. It suggests that the mountain offers something the lodge cannot. Guests report hearing these voices from different places. Some hear them near doors. Others near windows or along hallways. The voices never shout. They do not demand. They wait, repeating gently, as if confident they will be heard. The effect is unsettling. Thoughts slow. Time feels stretched. The idea of stepping outside becomes strangely reasonable, framed not as risk but as resolution. Most resist through effort and awareness. They sit closer to others. They focus on routine tasks. They wait for morning. Staff members encourage this, reminding guests of weather conditions and safety protocols. Lights remain on through the night in shared spaces, offering focus and grounding. Those who do step outside briefly describe immediate clarity. Cold air sharpens the senses. The voices stop the moment the door opens, replaced by wind and the sound of breathing. No one who has followed the voices has ever found what was promised. They return quickly, shaken but unharmed. The lodge has a quiet history of unexplained departures. Records note guests who chose to leave during storms against advice. Heading down the mountain and never arriving at lower stations. No trace was found beyond the vast snowfields. These events are rare and separated by years, but they remain part of the loggia's unspoken legacy. Some believe the mountain itself plays a role. High altitude, isolation, and monotony can distort perception. Others suggest that the lodge marks a psychological threshold, where exhaustion and exposure combine to challenge resolve. The voices, in this view, are internal, shaped by environment rather than origin. Yet the consistency of reports suggests something more structured. The same phrases. The same timing. The same promise of rest beyond effort. Whatever the source, it follows a pattern. Morning brings relief. Sunlight breaks over the peaks, scattering shadows and restoring scale. The dread lessens, retreating into memory. Voices do not return with daylight. Guests prepare to leave, eager to descend into familiar air and sound. For those who stayed through the night, the memory remains vivid. The mountain felt close. The silence felt heavy. The invitation felt personal. Final Ascent Lodge endures as a place where isolation tests resolve, where the line between rest and surrender blurs in thin air. It stands as a reminder that at the highest points, the greatest challenge is not the climb itself, but the quiet urge to stop moving forward. Thank you for climbing through the haunted mountain lodges of New Hampshire with me tonight. These lodges were built as shelters, but the mountains have claimed them as their own. They stand as reminders that isolation can be more terrifying than darkness, and silence can be louder than screams. Some guests leave with stories they never forget. Some leave something behind. And some say the mountains follow them home, appearing in dreams where snow falls endlessly and footsteps approach the door. If you ever stay at a remote mountain lodge, listen carefully. The wind may be carrying more than cold air. Would you dare spend a night alone in one of these lodges, surrounded by endless forest and watching Aisa? Or would you descend before nightfall? Rest well, my friend. Until our next haunted journey.